The Galactic Council had many rules. Some were ancient laws, carefully crafted to maintain order among the thousands of species under its domain. Others were diplomatic guidelines designed to avoid war at all costs. And then there were the unwritten rules, rules that every veteran of the council chambers knew by heart. The most important of them all? You do not threaten humanity. Unfortunately, Councillor Zeldrath of the Zixian Dominion had never learned that lesson. And today he was about to make the worst mistake of his life. A threat in the council chambers. The Grand Council chambers were a sight to behold, a colossal hall suspended in the vacuum of space, orbiting a dying star. It was a place where empires negotiated, where wars were averted, where civilizations rose and fell. And today, it was the site of an utterly foolish display of arrogance. Zeldrath stood at the center, his blue bioluminescent tendrils pulsing with anger. He was a high-ranking diplomat, a master of political manipulation. He had intimidated weaker species into submission before. He thought humanity would be no different. The Zixian Dominion demands immediate compliance, he growled, his elongated form towering over the human delegation. His 6 eyes glowed with menace. Your expansion is a violation of council law. If you do not withdraw from the frontier systems, your people will suffer. Our fleets will. He stopped. Because the human ambassador was smiling. A slow, knowing smile. Ambassador Elias Carter was an unremarkable man by galactic standards, short, broad-shouldered, dressed in an impeccably tailored black suit. He had barely moved during Zeldrath's speech, watching with mild amusement. Now he chuckled. Not nervous. Not afraid. Amused. Councillor Zeldrath, Carter said smoothly, do you know the difference between a threat and a promise? Zeldrath narrowed his eyes. You are in no position to. Carter leaned forward, resting his hands on the ancient marble table. His expression remained polite. Too polite. See, a threat, he continued, is something a weaker power uses to bluff. A promise? Well, his gaze locked onto the counselor's 6 glowing eyes. A promise is something humanity keeps. Zeldrath sneered. Are you suggesting that your fledgling species can stand against the Dominion? Carter exhaled. No, counselor. I'm not suggesting that at all. Then he straightened, buttoned his suit and picked up his data slate. I'm telling you outright. Then, with a final nod to the rest of the council, he walked away. Zeldrath scoffed. How laughable. He had issued an ultimatum and the humans had walked away? Fools. The Zixian Dominion would teach them a lesson. They would regret ever standing against him. The human response. Zeldrath wasted no time. Within hours, the Dominion's war machine was mobilizing. 30,000 warships set course for the human frontier colonies. Planet cracker bombs were readied, their payloads capable of turning entire worlds into lifeless husks. Propaganda broadcasts filled Zixian airwaves, boasting of their impending victory. But something was off. The humans were not panicking. The usual response to a war declaration was immediate: rushed evacuations, desperate pleas for peace, or outright surrender. But there was nothing from humanity. No fleets scrambling to intercept. No begging. No counter-threats. Just silence. And for the first time, doubt crept into Zeldrath's mind. The moment everything changed. It began exactly 24 hours after Carter had left the council chambers. A high-ranking Zixian officer burst into Zeldrath's war room, his tendrils quivering in sheer terror. Counselor, he gasped. It's the humans. Zeldrath turned irritated. What about them? Are they surrendering already? The officer's mouth opened, but no words came out. He simply raised a shaking limb and activated the holographic display. And Zeldrath felt his blood turn to ice. Because the war wasn't coming to the human frontier. The war was already inside the Zixian Dominion. Humanity didn't wait, they struck first. Every major Zixian defense station was gone. Their border fleets? Destroyed. Their supply lines? Annihilated. Zeldrath's eyes darted across the reports. Entire planets were going dark. But how? How had the humans bypassed their defenses? The answer was horrifyingly simple. They had never planned to defend. While the Dominion had been preparing for war in the frontier, humanity had already sent its fleets deep into Zixian space. They hadn't wasted time with formal engagements. They hadn't moved cautiously. They had gone straight for the throat. And now the Dominion was bleeding out. Terror in the capital. Zeldrath staggered back, his limbs twitching in disbelief. No, this isn't possible. But it was. Because humanity hadn't just sent warships. They had sent something far worse. They had sent ghost fleets. stealth drones that jam sensors, strike teams that hacked planetary defense grids from the inside, cyber warfare viruses that turned Zixian ships against their own crews. Entire cities were in flames before the Dominion even realized they were under attack. The final message. As the Zixian capital burned, Zeldrath received a final transmission. A single human fleet had entered orbit above his homeworld, and at its head was Elias Carter. The human ambassador stood on the bridge of a colossal warship, its gun batteries aimed at the surface. His expression? The same as before. Calm, amused, unshaken. Counselor Zeldrath, Carter said smoothly, do you know the difference between a warning and a lesson? Zeldrath trembled. Please. Carter's eyes gleamed. A warning is what I gave you yesterday. Then he leaned forward. A lesson is what you're about to learn. Zeldrath had always believed in absolute power. For centuries, the Zixian Dominion had ruled through fear and overwhelming force. Their war fleets had crushed countless civilizations. Their empire had grown vast, their rule unchallenged. But now, as he stared at the holographic feed of his burning homeworld, he understood something with terrifying clarity. Humanity was not like the others. They did not beg. They did not bargain. They struck. And when they struck, they did not stop until the lesson had been learned in blood. The wrath of the Ghost Fleet. The entire Zixian High Command was in chaos. Where are our defense fleets? One warlord screamed. Lost. What about the planetary shield grid? Compromised. Surely the human fleet is taking damage. None, the defense coordinator croaked. They haven't lost a single ship. Zeldrath's tendrils clenched into trembling knots. That was impossible. The Dominion's warships were legendary, each one a behemoth of firepower and shielding. It would take a sustained, prolonged assault to break through their planetary defenses. But the humans had done it in a single night. And they hadn't even needed a full invasion force. Instead, they had sent the Ghost Fleet, an armada of cyber warfare dreadnoughts, cloaked assault carriers and infiltration craft. While the Dominion's war fleets waited at the border, humanity had already infiltrated their core systems. Entire orbital stations shut down mid-battle, their crews trapped in powerless hulks. Planetary defense turrets turned on their own cities, raining destruction upon their own people. Warships received conflicting commands, colliding with one another in confusion before being ripped apart. This wasn't war. This was surgical annihilation. And the worst part? The humans never announced their presence. There were no demands, no declarations, no warning. Just the silent, methodical destruction of everything the Dominion had built. The enemy that never stopped. Zeldrath's mind raced. This wasn't possible. This shouldn't be happening. The humans were a young species. A race that had only recently entered the galactic stage. How had they done this? The answer, he realized, was horrifyingly simple. Humans had spent their entire history perfecting the art of war. Unlike the Dominion, which had used its might to intimidate and dominate weaker species, humanity had been forged in the fire of its own brutality. They had fought endless wars on their own world, mastering strategy, deception, and total war before they had even reached the stars. And now, that ancient knowledge was being turned against the Dominion. For every Zixian fleet that mobilized, the humans were already 3 steps ahead. For every defensive maneuver, the humans had already countered it before it was made. The Zixian Dominion wasn't fighting an enemy. They were being hunted. The day the Dominion died, Zeldrath's body trembled as he stared at the final report from the warfront. Over 70% of the Dominion's military assets were gone. Not just defeated, erased. Entire fleets? Gone. Planetary supply chains? Destroyed. Their most secure military installations? Compromised and taken over. The Zixian Dominion, which had once ruled half the known galaxy, was no longer an empire. It was prey. And then, for the first time in his life, Zeldrath felt something he had never known before. Fear. Because humanity was not stopping. The final broadcast. Every screen, every transmission across the Zixian Dominion flickered to black. And then a single image appeared. The image of a human. Not a warlord. Not a general. Ambassador Elias Carter. His suit was as crisp as ever. His expression was calm. His voice, even, controlled. Dangerous. To the citizens of the Zixian Dominion, he said smoothly, I offer my sincerest condolences. His eyes gleamed. Your leaders have led you to ruin. Zeldrath's breath hitched. He knew what was coming next. The terms. Every conquered empire had them. Unconditional surrender, the dismantling of the government, forced servitude. But what Carter said next made Zeldratha's blood run cold. "We do not seek conquest." The words hung in the air like a silent dagger. Carter continued. "We do not seek to rule you. We do not demand tribute, nor servitude, nor obedience." Zeldratha's jaw tightened. Then what? What did they want? Carter's smile disappeared. "We want you to remember." The screens flickered, and suddenly the destruction of the Dominion played in real time. Cities collapsing into fire and ash. Warships breaking apart in space, their crews sucked into the void. Entire planets falling silent as if they had never existed at all. The price of arrogance. Then Carter spoke again. "The Galactic Council has long whispered a simple rule, one you, Counselor Zeldrath, failed to respect." He leaned forward. "You do not threaten humanity." Then the screens blinked to black. And the war was over. The aftermath. Zeldrath sat in the ruins of his war chamber, his body trembling. The Dominion was gone. His armies? Scattered. His power? Extinguished. And humanity? They had already left. They had burned the Dominion to the ground, not to conquer, not to claim territory, but to make an example. They did not threaten. They did not negotiate. They gave warnings. And when those warnings were ignored, they delivered consequences. As Zeldrath gazed at the hollow wreckage of what had once been his empire, only one thought remained. One chilling, horrifying thought. Humanity did not rule the galaxy. But they could, if they ever decided to. Zeldrath had seen planetary annihilation before. He had ordered it. He had watched as civilizations burned, their cries of defiance turning into static on a dead frequency. He had reveled in the power of the Dominion, in the iron grip it held over the weak. But this was different. This was not war. This was a dismantling. One by one, the systems that had once formed the backbone of the Zixian Dominion were being erased. The Wraithstar shipyards, the industrial heart of their fleet, had vanished overnight, its orbital platforms shattered, its engineers taken or killed. The grand treasury of Zuin-Karth, where the wealth of 1,000 conquered worlds had been hoarded, now lay in ruin, not stolen, just obliterated, as if to say, "You will never rise again." The Dominion's command networks, encrypted across hundreds of secure relay points, had been hijacked, reprogrammed, and repurposed, not by a cyber warfare attack, but by a far more terrifying force. By human intelligence officers who had already infiltrated them years ago. This wasn't retaliation. This was retribution. A throne of ashes. Zeldrath stood at the shattered remains of his war table, once the symbol of his absolute dominion. Now the once glowing hollow projector displayed only static, all fleet signals gone, their distress beacons silent. His warlords were either dead, captured, or in hiding. His admirals had all vanished into the void, their ships lifeless husks drifting through space. The Zixian Dominion no longer existed. And humanity? They had simply left. They hadn't stayed to revel in their victory. They hadn't declared themselves the new rulers of the Dominion's shattered remains. They had burned everything and walked away. Because they had never wanted to rule. They only wanted one thing, vengeance. And now that it had been delivered, they had no further interest in what remained. That, more than anything else, sent a deep and horrifying shudder through Zeldratha's core. They could have ruled. They could have claimed his world, his resources, his empire. Instead, they had destroyed him so utterly that there was nothing left to rule. And that meant no one else would ever dare rise against them again. A universe that watched in silence. The Galactic Council convened in a private, encrypted meeting. Every species was present. The Scarith, whose vast empires had always been untouchable in their ivory towers. The Theln, whose fleets had rivaled the Dominions, now watching the feeds with mute horror. The Var, whose warlike nature had once been considered the most brutal in the galaxy, now trembling at the implications. Every screen displayed the smoldering wreckage of the Zixian homeworld. Every leader knew exactly what had happened. And none of them spoke. Because in the span of 3 days humanity had taken the most feared empire in the galaxy, and snuffed it out like an afterthought. "Are they still transmitting?" one of the counselors whispered. The hollow operator nodded. "Just one message. It repeats every standard hour." The counselors looked at each other uneasily. "Play it," the high speaker commanded. The feed flickered. The face of Ambassador Elias Carter appeared once again. His voice was calm, measured. This was not an act of conquest. It was an act of clarity. The counselors shuddered. "Do not mistake our patience for weakness." The screen went dark. Silence stretched across the chamber. Then, one by one, entire species made the same decision simultaneously. They sent messages to their admirals. They recalled their diplomats. They rewrote their strategic doctrines overnight. Because the unspoken truth was clear. Humanity was no longer just another species in the galactic community. They were the apex predator. The Council's secret vote. High Speaker Jorlax, one of the oldest living beings in the galaxy, had seen the rise and fall of many civilizations. But never like this. Move to the next order of business, he rasped. A single line of text appeared before the Council. Proposal 91837, Official Galactic Resolution. Do not provoke humanity. The vote was unanimous. And the moment it passed, every empire across the stars adjusted its priorities. Military spending reduced. Diplomatic efforts with humanity intensified. All intelligence agencies given the same single order. Never let what happened to the Dominion happen to us. The galaxy had learned its lesson. And they would never forget it. The galaxy had fallen silent. For the first time in recorded history there were no wars. No border skirmishes. No ambitious warlords rallying fleets. Because everyone had seen what happened to the Zixian Dominion. And no one wanted to be next. Zeldratha's final lesson. Deep in the ruins of what was once the Zixian throne world, Zeldrath still lived. He was no longer the supreme warlord. He was no longer a ruler of anything. His world was dust and fire. His empire had been erased from existence. Yet somehow the humans had left him alive. Not out of mercy. Out of purpose. Because there had to be someone left to tell the story. Someone to explain to future civilizations why you never provoke humanity. Zeldrath, once feared across the stars, was now a living warning. He spent his days staring at the remains of his own fleet, now just drifting wreckage. He spent his nights hearing the echoes of the one message humanity had left behind, still broadcasting from a satellite in orbit. Do not mistake our patience for weakness. The words were carved into his mind. The lesson had been taught. And every species in the galaxy had learned it well. The unseen war. Even as peace settled across the galaxy, something unspoken had taken root. Every empire, every military force, every shadow organization now operated under one universal law. Never give humanity a reason to fight. Because now the fear was not just about their weapons. Not just about their technology. It was about something far worse. Their mindset. The way they had erased an empire without hesitation. The way they had walked away without asking for tribute, land or power. The way they had left nothing but a message. No boasting. No threats. Just cold, calculated annihilation. That was what terrified the galaxy most. A war that would never happen. High Speaker Jorlax sat alone in his chamber, staring at the official vote results. The resolution was permanent now. No empire would ever raise a fleet against humanity. Not out of respect. Out of terror. Jorlax sighed and poured himself a drink. His claws trembled as he brought the glass to his lips. Humanity had not demanded submission. They had not enslaved their enemies. They had simply ensured that no one would ever dare to fight them again. And in doing so they had won the greatest war in history, without ever declaring it. The New Galactic Order. In the years that followed, something remarkable happened. Trade with humanity flourished. Political alliances became stronger. Species that once warred now focused on survival, expansion, and prosperity. Because even the most warlike species had realized something. Humanity was the last war. And because of that, peace had finally taken root in the stars. It wasn't utopia. There were still conflicts, still rivalries. But they never escalated. Because everyone remembered what happened to the last species that thought war with humans was a good idea. Final transmission. The message from humanity still played in the depths of space. Still a warning. Still a promise. And still no one had dared to test it. Do not mistake our patience for weakness. The galaxy never did again. Fire, want to witness the next time someone forgets? Subscribe now for more human dominance.